Amy from Doodle Dog Designs, and today I'm going to show you how I dye wool using some Cushing's dye. Let's get started. I have chosen 4 different fat quarters. I've chosen ones that look a little bit different to start with, have different coloring, and that produces an interesting variance in coloring with the finished dyed products. So the first step is to take your wool that's already been felted, and you want to get it wet and soak it for a while, at least an hour. So I just put it in the sink, and I've got some lukewarm water in here and a little bit of dish soap. I'm using some Ivory dish soap. I take each piece, put it in individually, and push it down to make sure it gets wet all over. Usually turn it over once when I get to the end, just to want to make sure everything gets totally wet and can soak for a while. So I'm going to leave that for at least an hour and then come back to it later. But once they have soaked for a while, I'm going to take them out and squeeze most of the water out and put them in a dish pan to transport them to the stove. When you're dyeing wool, it's important to make sure that you're using stainless steel pans and utensils. So I'm going to start with a small pan with just a little bit of water in it to dissolve the dye in. I've got some Cushing's Jade Green color, and it is the acid dye. We want to make sure when you're working with wools to use acid dyes. So I'm just going to open the little packet and dump it in. Turn my heat on. I'm going to bring this to a boil and let all of the little powders dissolve in there. Now while that's dissolving, I've also got a big pot that I'm going to get filled about 2/3 full with water. You want to make sure that your big pot is big enough that all of your fabric can fit in it and have room to flow around. The more the fabric flows around, the more even your color is going to be in your fabric. So if you want really mottled colors, you don't want to stir very often. But if you want a fairly solid piece of fabric, you want to make sure that you stir it often and there's plenty of movement in there. I like to kind of tip it up and see if you can see any powder. It'll usually be stuck on the bottom. Looks like all the powder is dissolved here. So now I'm going to pour my dye solution into my big pot. And I'm going to rinse the pot out and pour it in there again. Now when you're dyeing, you want to be careful. These dyes will stain your countertop and your stove and your clothes and your hands and everything. So now take each piece of fabric and open it up and drop it in there. Stir it around good. Okay, once that one's looks like it's in there and gotten the dye on it everywhere, you want to take the next piece and do the same thing. Each packet of the Cushing's dye dyes about 1 pound of fabric, which is I have found to be anywhere from a yard to yard and a fourth, a yard and a half maybe, depending on how thick your fabric is. I'm just using a yard this time. Okay, it looks like that's going to be a pretty color. So now I'm going to turn the heat on high and let it get going and cook it until it starts simmering, and then I'm going to turn the heat down and let it simmer for 30 to 40 minutes. As it's heating up, you want to be sure to stir it regularly. That helps ensure an even dye. Again, if you want a more mottled look, stir less often. Whatever pots you use, pots and utensils you use for dyeing your fabric, you want to dedicate to dyeing. Don't use them afterwards for food products. So after it has simmered a while, you're going to add some vinegar. I just use plain old vinegar. I buy it in a big jug. Just put a few glugs in there. Stir it around, and then let it simmer for a little while longer, maybe about 20 minutes. The dye packets are made up of a powder that has a bunch of different colors all mixed together, and the different colors take different amounts of time and different heat levels in order to adhere to your fabric. So you want to be sure and simmer your fabric long enough that all of the different colors that mix together to make the color you want. So, but anytime, if you're happy with the color, you can take it out if it's the color you want. But I like to keep cooking until my water is fairly clear, and I'm not there yet, so I'm going to keep going. Once the water turns clearish, it isn't ever completely clear, but it's pretty clear, as you can see. You want to turn off the heat and let it cool until it's room temperature. And then you're going to rinse the wool. And I just rinse it really good, and then when I squeeze it, when the water runs clear, then I know it's got all the excess dye out. This is already coming clear. Sometimes if you're using a red or some of the darker dyes, it takes quite a bit of rinsing to get the water to come clear. Then I'm going to hang these outside to dry. I actually usually use a clothespin and hang them on my patio chairs. Okay, now it's all dry, and I just wanted to show you the variations in the coloring from the different wools. You can still see the checks here and the stripes in this one. And this one that started out a lot darker is still darker. So I have 4 different shades of the same color. I hope you found that helpful. If you did, please be sure to subscribe below and hit the like button. I'll see you next time. Bye.